Hi, everybody. I want to take a few minutes and talk about writing effective abstracts since you guys should be pretty close to being done with your capstone project. So I wanted to make sure that everybody had an understanding as to what an abstract was, some examples of effective as well as ineffective sort of abstracts, but then also how you could go through and get some assistance if necessary with respect to these abstracts. So first things first, and then we discussed this earlier in the semester, and I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of what an abstract is. An abstract is a concise summary of your final paper. So essentially, before you write the abstract, you have to be done with your paper pretty much, okay? Or putting the final touches on it. If I were to think about the various parts of it, essentially what you're going to do is you're going to start by giving an overview as to whatever the issue might be. All right, so that could be a sentence or two. And then also supporting research. So things that have already been done with respect to whatever your issue or whatever your topic might be. So things that might support your stance, those sorts of things. Next thing you're going to do is talk about the methods that you use to collect the data, any major findings, right? And this is an important part. This is where you're going to do all of your math stuff. Okay, so in here, you're going to put all of your like p-values, test value, any standard deviations or anything like that, your critical values, your alpha level, all right, the type of test, those sorts of things. Okay. With the data collection methods, that's where you're going to put in like what type of methodology did you distribute your survey with? Did you use an observational study? Was it some sort of experiment? Those sorts of things. And then the section with the conclusion, that's going to be basically a sentence or two talking about what the hypothesis test did or suggested, as well as any inferences that you can make. Okay. So I'm going to go through a couple examples of, or good effective examples of these abstracts, as well as some ineffective ones and why they're not effective. So really quickly, and I know there's a lot on here, but I just want to make sure that everybody's aware as to why this is going to be effective, as opposed to something that might not be. So if you want to pause this and read it, I'll let you do so. But what you'll notice in the first few sentences is that the writer just talks about what the actual overall sort of premise of the research was. So in short, that the SAT could be linked to GPA, all right? And of course, there are a lot of people, as well as a lot of studies, that suggest that SATs are biased based on a number of factors. So the student went through, they talked about how they captured the surveys, okay, when they did it, and then also the type of test that was employed, two-mean hypothesis test, um, a little bit of stuff, a little bit of information about that. 10% significance level, there was evidence to suggest a significant difference, okay? So, and then finally, the last sentence, the students have a higher GPA are likely to have a higher SAT score, all right? So that would be like your conclusions as well as also some forward thinking. Notice nothing in here is all that deep. Okay, this is a very general overview as to what an abstract is. A second example of an effective abstract. This is one where the student determined whether or not social media was beneficial or detrimental to society, right? And so they talked about some research that's been given an overview, right? And then finally, or actually midway through, they talked about a survey question and different types of things on the survey. 112 responses, average rating of 3.5. They were testing to determine if the average rating was higher than 3.5. And notice that they said that there was going to be a test, said that it suggested that the average rating was, noticing that T was 5.188, okay, that the significance was greater than 3 for this, okay. So, and then finally, the student suggests that social media is likely to be viewed as beneficial as opposed to detrimental to society, all right. So again, really brief overview about what was done with that throughout this paper. Notice the research paper, the research portion, that could be a page, 2 pages, 3 pages. The students summarized it very quickly in maybe a couple sentences. All right, and that's what you should be aiming for, is to summarize your sections in a sentence, 2 or 3. Some examples of some abstracts that are not so good or not effective. Again, if you want to pause this and read this really quickly, just so that way we don't spend a lot of time reading this, but for a few reasons that this is not effective. Okay. So essentially, there's no supporting research. If we look at this, we tell what the paper suggests that they did, that the student did. Um, there were two sections taught by the same professor covering the same content with exception of the exercise on the first day of class. They were surveyed. The student responses and experiments, but they didn't necessarily talk about what they were actually testing for. So are they testing an average response of 1 to 5? Are they testing a proportion of people that suggested yes, it was beneficial or no, it wasn't beneficial? Also, I want you to notice that there's run-on sentences. Okay, there's several run-on sentences throughout this, and also there's some roundabout discussion within this. So when you're writing your abstract, obviously you want to make sure that you're effectively writing. No sample size, no collection methods, no summary, no test value, no p-value, right? No conclusion. Okay, so future trajectory survey students in each section reveals surprisingly different paths. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean anything with respect to what the abstract or what the paper actually suggested. All right, so clearly this is not a good abstract for a number of reasons. A second ineffective example, and again, if you want to pause the video so you can read it, essentially, the paper presents an assessment framework for engineering capstone design program. Okay, that's great. Um, so one thing that we want to make sure of is that when you're writing this, you never want to use first or second pronouns. You always want to focus on the actual study. All right, so eliminate words like we, I, they, my, etc. Just make sure, or to the writer, etc. So the abstract begins with a concise statement, but then it wanders from good technical writing. So again, there's not an effective technical writing throughout this paper. The abstract written in first person, that's a no-no, especially in technical writing. There's no results. Okay, so basically the last sentence, we comment specifically on what students thought were the most important aspects of the experience, but they didn't necessarily talk about what are the results. No tests going on, no hypothesis tests, nothing that they're actually showing what they're demonstrating. All right, so use these as a framework for being able to draft your abstracts as you're going through and finishing up your papers. Now, one last thing is, where can you get help with writing your abstract? So a good place to start is to go look at this Blackboard file. Okay, it's best practices in writing and research document. Okay, if you go into the capstone project link and you look at pages 2 through 4, in fact, let me show you that really quickly. So if you go into Blackboard and if you click on the capstone project, and if you click on or this capstone project folder, best practices in research and writing, all right, and then this file will come up. Okay, if you go down to page at the bottom of page 2, okay, it talks about what an abstract is, some of which I summarized, a good and a bad abstract. Okay, some other sorts of things with respect to this. So this might be a good read for you as you're finishing up or actually starting with your abstract. Okay. Another place that you can get assistance with is if you want to go and talk with me during your student hours or your capstone meetings, or if you want to email me questions, I'm always happy to help you guys out with your abstracts. And then if you want to also get some help, the Learning Center will probably give you some assistance with being able to effectively communicate. Now, they're not going to write your abstract for you, but what they will do is they might look at sentence structure. They might look at ways for you to improve your abstract based on other students, those sorts of things. Right. So hopefully this has been helpful. And also, if you have some questions or anything like that, certainly feel free to email me or schedule some time during one of my office hours, or we could just answer those questions during the capstone meetings. All right, good luck to everybody with your abstracts. Take care.